ecosystem actors. And for all these years, what we have heard a lot about what is the pain, why is the pain, but we never heard anything about how to fix that pain. So that's why we are here today, to try to bring this type of solutions that can start fixing this ecosystem fragmentation within the ecosystem and between ecosystems. Try to start collecting solutions that can help to fix that ecosystem connectivity issue. And we feel that with this session, we are able to inspire all of you with new methods, with new tools, with new applications, with new best practices that you can put into practice in your ecosystem. So we hope that you can enjoy the whole session, and we hope that you can participate a lot with your own questions and with your own cases, because that's the way that the session will be more attractive for everyone. And thanks so much for coming again. So we would like to start basically to go deeper into the problem that we have seen so far. For that, we have created a panel, and we would like to invite to the stage 4 people that can bring different perspectives on the ecosystem. So the first one is Razvan Anistorey, is Policy Officer in the Task Force Unit of European Innovation Council. The second one is Teemu Roponen. He's the General Manager of MyData Global, an award-winning international non-profit. Yeah, please. The third one is Angel Kwa. She's the co-founder of Alix Co. P2P and Funded by Me Malaysia. She's a visionary and dynamic entrepreneur from Penang, Malaysia. And the last one, I would like to invite Han Ji Xiang, who is Vice President of Technology and Innovation in MyData, international agency under the Ministry of Entrepreneur Development, with the mandate to support innovation and entrepreneurship in Malaysia. Please. So, first of all, I would like to start really simple, because we have like a really global audience. Many are here from Europe, but we also have attendees from Asia, from North America, from Africa as well. So we would like to start with you, Razvan.
That's fine.
Could you please explain a little bit about what the European Commission is doing about connecting ecosystems?
Does it work? Okay. Good evening, everybody. I can say evening, although it's strange. So I'll try actually to make my pitch here for the large audience that was introduced, because not everybody knows about what the European Commission is as a whole. But for, let's say, if it's to say it in 2 words, it's like a government of a country. So it's the executive power of Europe. Nevertheless, Europe is not one country, and the government of Europe is not really, or cannot really act like the government of a country. There are 28 member states at the moment. There are 28 regulatory frameworks on innovation, on competition, on IP. So what we try to do now, because we are very much aware of this fragmented ecosystem, let's say, there are a lot of wonderful clusters of innovation in Europe. Most of them are around the big cities, the big capitals of the big countries of Europe. Some of them are in other smaller cities. The problem is that they are not properly connected, and we are very much aware of the way it looks at the moment. Now, it might be regarded as a blessing, the fact that they are not so well connected, because I was talking with some of you before. I think we don't really want Europe as a Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley doesn't only come with innovation, with mindset, with all this, it also comes with a lot of social problems. I'm not sure Europe is really ready to embrace this type of social pressure on housing, accommodation, on services, you name it. So It's very good to have this maybe fragmented geographically, culturally, linguistically ecosystems. But at the same time, why shouldn't we try to connect them harmoniously as much as we can? So this is what the European Commission, through the new Horizon Europe framework program, is going to or will be trying to do. And for this, there are 500 million euro envisaged. Let's say the budget is not yet fully voted, but they're under the pillar of innovation, where you have the European Innovation Council, you have the European EIT, European Institute of Technology, and the so-called innovation ecosystems, which alone helps the 500 million. And that's the role. I will not go very deep into that, but I know maybe we'll follow up on how this innovation ecosystem structure might look like.
Yeah. One of the things that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that you are keeping like ongoing conversations with different type of ecosystem actors all around Europe. Which are the type of demands or challenges that they are facing, that they are communicating to European Union?
Well, this is a question put a little bit at the wrong time, because exactly now we started last week with the first participatory workshop with stakeholders of the innovation ecosystems, and we actually separated them so far. The actors in the innovation ecosystems are very many. I mean, cornerstones such as universities as knowledge providers, and then other type of foundation agencies, regions, cities, and so on. We started a series of workshops, participatory workshops, where we actually try to gather exactly these challenges and bottlenecks that these actors of the innovation ecosystems are facing. And they came to Brussels last week. The SME, it was the first set of stakeholders. The SMEs representatives, let's say, if they were organized under an umbrella or startups, and they started communicating the main challenges that they face at the moment, and they eventually came with solutions. Now, I cannot go on. I cannot comment on behalf of all the other actors, because the consultations and the workshops are continuing. Throughout next year, we'll build actually the work program for the innovation ecosystems, and for this we actually need your input. And that's really important, because we are more than ever ready to listen much more to what is it needed in the innovation ecosystem. So, but if it's to summarize, it's clear that we talk about the 3 C's: capital, competencies, connectedness, plus D, the diversity. So basically, that is what we'll probably focus on: how to retain and to encourage talent in Europe. And there is more and more probably choosing Europe for the lifestyle. But when I talk about talent, is also talent, entrepreneurial talent, not only scientific talent, because that we are full of. That's clear. We do have. Now, how do we nurture it, and how do we attract and develop entrepreneurial talent as well? And then is the connectedness. That is really an important factor that we have to enable more, and the capital. We are lagging a little bit behind. Nevertheless, there is capital. There is dormant capital in Europe. How do we actually unleash it from there to serve the innovation ecosystems? That is another question.
You said that you are ready to, or you are willing to listen from all parts of Europe.
Yes.
So which are the channels that we have to communicate, challenges, gaps, anything that is important and relevant for European Commission?
You mean
channels like, what type of channels like?
Ah, yes, okay. So if it's, I didn't want to go too much because I'm not alone here, so I thought we were making a discussion that besides these participatory workshops, where we actually try to have a wide distribution throughout Europe, east, west, north, south. So that's how we made the selection. We have an online EU survey, developing innovation ecosystems, and it will be running starting 1st of December until mid-January, I think, something like that. And the questions are very clear. They are developed in a matrix, like what are the real challenges between the actors, so startup versus startup, university. How difficult do they find it to connect in their local ecosystem, in their regional ecosystem, in the national ecosystem, in the European ecosystem. And based on this, this will be more quantitative type of data that we'll get. We'll see how, let's say, a startup, or how does a public authority sees the connectedness, and how do they see access to capital, how do they see access to competencies or to talent. And based on that, we'll try to, backed up by the discussions, let's say the qualitative output from the workshops, will build our strategy in the innovation ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. Any question from the audience? It's all clear. No doubts. I can't believe it.
In fact, I can just supplement what I said with the fact that if you are interested in participating in such a workshop, just come once I'm done here to me, and we can try to connect, and you'll get an invitation to attend one of these workshops. What is better representing you? We'll have investors, we'll have corporates in the next 2 weeks. On the 9th of December, we'll have universities and so on. So if you think you find yourself relevant in one of these workshops, come and communicate. If you don't get the chance, because we usually work with umbrella organizations, the European Universities Association, for example, which has their say and represents more universities, but also individual actors will be welcome. So just come, and we'll invite you, and we'll be happy to actually get your input. And if you don't get to come to Brussels in these workshops, just fill in the survey that will be circulated, and that is a very serious survey, because we are actually building on that.
From where you can find that survey?
It is on the, what we normally do, how we usually disseminate it is via our channels of disseminating towards stakeholders, and they are going, let's say, cascading. So the main, let's say, the regions will send it to their, let's say, small innovation ecosystems and so on. So it will go in a cascading mode. But if you actually want just to let your business card later to me, I'll just ask my assistant to do it.
We have one question here.
Yes, just wondering, it sounds like an exercise that EIT did a few years ago, and I know EIT has been doing like market mapping and ecosystem development, and has been investing quite significantly in that in the past few years. It sounds to me like a kind of starting from scratch with it again with EIC, or am I missing something here? Everything you said, I remember EIT doing. So I'm just wondering why we're doing it again, and what's changed, and what different focus we're going to bring to that.
Well, first of all, European Innovation Council is an entity, if you know the European Research Council, is something similar to that. So really excellent science, bottom-up approach. You come with any sort of ideas, you pull it into our exercise, into our instruments, and we decide whether it's worth or not to fund. So it's a little bit different, because EIT is much more developed, much more advanced. And you will go, I saw the EIT type of project, EIT ecosystem, but EIC is going to work in close collaboration with EIT. It's nevertheless a completely different type of instrument. It will have instruments that will finance really early stage development, even proof of concept. And it will have instruments that will have eventually grant, or blended grant plus equity, or simply just grant. And that will depend very much on how this idea is being evaluated. Number one. Number two is really disruptive. So EIC will only fund very disruptive technologies. And when I talk about disruptive, it's not necessarily high tech. It can be even social innovation. Social innovation can be disruptive. You come with a new idea of how to improve, I don't know, the medical system just by registering better the customer. So,
yeah, and sorry to interrupt, but what I was asking about was the market mapping and the ecosystem mapping that you're talking about there was already done. And I'm wondering why we're doing it again.
I'm not convinced that the ecosystem, the way we EIT did it, I wasn't at that mapping exercise, but I know about it, and I'm not sure it was involving to this extent all the aspects, because here we are talking also about the funding agencies, national funding agencies under the umbrella of TAFTI members. We are talking also about the ministries and authorities that are in charge of regulation, for instance, in each country, trying to align them or to put them together to find a good way of easy regulation for innovation and to enable this connectedness. So,
Okay,
sorry.
let's move on to Pekka. Pekka, thanks so much for coming. First of all, I would like that you could explain what MyData is, please.
All right, good evening everybody. My name is Sten Broppanen. I'm the general manager of MyData Global. It's a global non-profit organization, basically a network organization working to give individuals the control over their personal data. So building on the likes of GDPR and the data protection rules and regulations around the world, but turning that into an innovation possibility. What is the positive data sharing future in which we, with our consent, share data and get better public services, get new innovative solutions. And that definitely is a difficult job, as we know enormous amounts of data are being gathered about us and also used without our real consent, although in some cases maybe, yes, I've read terms of service type of consent. So MyData Global, we have now, the community has existed for several years and has started here in Finland by joining existing communities and actually by a recommendation of the European Commission to kind of bridge existing communities. We've existed as an organization for just over a year and now have members from over 40 countries worldwide as we realize that these are global issues. The members include startups, government agencies, academia, non-profits, and individuals working on the topic of personal data. So I'm actually really interested also here, not only to see the Europeans, but particularly our friends from Malaysia and Asia, just heading next week to South Korea and Japan to work on these topics, who, by the way, are advancing very fast. We tend to think easily that, oh, we have the general data protection regulation, oh, we are spearheading now in Europe. Let's not forget our friends in Asia.
Okay. The name of this panel is Digital Transformation in the Startup Ecosystem, and as you know, so digital in the digital world, data is everything. So in the context of digital transformation applied to a startup ecosystem, is all about information sharing and traceability and tracking users that are interacting with different type of services from the ecosystem. So what do you think is the main challenges when it comes to data portability in the context of?
Sure. So if data portability is a term you don't, maybe not everybody knows. I mean, it's basically the right to take data from one service, port that same data to another one. It could be, for example, what we're watching on Netflix, take that to HBO so that HBO can better recommend you what you are watching, or something like that. And that is one of the beauties of GDPR, and one that we are very, very happy about. How can we join all the data from our smart devices in one dashboard, for example? Well, right now, many standards are missing, and enforcement of that regulation, in fact. But what I mean by standards is the technical standards, yes, for data types and such, but also the way that, for example, the business models work. And here I think part of the ecosystem's work that I know that the Startup Commons is doing is relevant, that what kind of contracts do we have in place to enable that sharing, or if I combine data from multiple places, how will that revenue be split between these different entities, and what are the liabilities there? So right now, many of the kind of data sharing practices are not only difficult technically, but also difficult. There's a lot of legal friction there. And one of our goals is to decrease that friction and to make sure that data can flow as long as the individual is the one who is in charge.
Okay. Any questions from the audience?
Can you talk about any standardization work starting on MyData side?
Yeah, that's a good question. So about standardization, that's actually something that we are pushing, and literally just on my way here, just discussing very heavily. We're pushing for example, the EU to start work on creating standards, and again, not just technical standards, but some other ones as well. Probably there will be a need for some hard regulation to push, for example, certain data sets, certain APIs to be opened. Like in Finland, we have, it's in the transportation sector, so basically any ticketing services, for example, need to have open APIs. But at the same time, there needs to be industry-based soft regulation. But I think many of those are, I mean, there have been some initiatives, for example, in the telecom sector, some of the key telcos of the GSMA have worked on the data portability standards, but it's still very early phases. And that's why we are pushing, and there's something that we have called a new governance initiative, which we've also discussed with the EIC, actually, on starting some standardization work. We will not ourselves be doing standards, but we will be participating and making requirements for those standards. I think plenty of standardization bodies exist already.
More questions? Okay, thanks. Angel, thanks so much for joining us from Malaysia to Finland. You are representing one specific supporting function within the ecosystem, which is the funding by using digital methods like crowdfunding or P2P. I would like to know what type of, or what data would you want to have or get from ecosystem actors in Malaysia?
Well, thank you for having me. So I'm Angel from Malaysia, like everyone knows, and we are just straight to your questions. Well, we hoped, thanks for the opportunities. Well, we hoped ecosystem builder like Magics can recommend us more qualities, high growth startups. Yeah. As a funding tool, I mean, one of the funding vehicles in Malaysia and Southeast Asia. I also have my folks working on Sweden's and Nordics markets as well. We find out that it's not about the investor, just the key thing is the good companies. And when we say about good companies, yeah, for now we are looking at social impact, but at the same time high growth and creditworthy, right?
And at the same time, what relevant information, data, you could share with others within the ecosystem? What would you be willing to share with others for the benefit of everyone in the Malaysian ecosystem?
So I think the question is broad, which aspects, specific groups that we are looking at. And if you will ask me to share to startups, investors, it will be different groups, which are the two main groups that we are looking on, or if it's a service providers. So if I may just share for startups, then we are looking at the data, which we always have it in our platform, is what kind of investment that the globals or the crowds investors are looking at for now. Like a lot of time, the trends now are going to sustainables, impact businesses, women run, anything related to good causes. And these are the things, or clean, green, all this related, right? And investors, what are the trends and the size, ticket size, and who are there? So we're looking at crowdfunding to be specific, especially in Southeast Asia and as well as Europe. We got the data like more than 45% investor now who go into a crowdfunding, which is a crowd investing tools, are mainly 35 above, yeah, that kind of things. Right. I think data now is no longer a secret for crowdfunding people like us.
Okay. Any question from the audience?
So I know that because one of the themes here is transferring best practices and transferring solutions from one market to another, and you're representing Funded by Me, right, from Sweden. Can you share something about the experience of transferring that platform and that business model from Sweden to Malaysia?
Well, that's a very good question. Thanks for that. Right. Initially, when I wanted to start the business and working with doing a specific equity crowdfundings, I looked around my regions. It's too new that time. But when I look back to Nordic or some Western Europe, as I see, it's already a norm or it's already a household terms. So what we do is we find out the technologies and the mindset, especially architecting technologies and innovations, whatsoever you call it, are very much advanced in your regions. And what we have to merit your good thing is we have market, and perhaps we have also workers in the sense that me myself as a runner of the Sweden, I like to call myself as a runner, and for Sweden to run it in Southeast Asia, yeah. So to deploy it is a mixture of what goods in a sense, and we just merit, of course, in a legal way. So yeah.
Thanks so much. Tan, I have intentionally left you in the last position because you are the money guy, right? And you and your team are rolling up the sleeves to basically to make the digital connectivity happen within my ecosystem. And I would like to know how your team is structured, because it's quite a unique approach that you have there in Malaysia. Which is the size of your team? Which are the competence or skills that your team have to basically to start enabling this type of digital connectivity within your ecosystem?
Thanks, Oscar, for it. So probably I would like to introduce about Magic first. As for the background, we are government-funded agency in Malaysia to help startups. But there are many other agencies that's helping the startup as well. So in a way, there's a function overlapping. But Magic is kind of unique in a way because we don't directly give funding to the startups. We believe that through the educations, we can help the startup to be more successful. And my team is actually a tech innovation team inside Magic. So as you know, there's not many government agencies which have an internal tech team per se that can build their own software stack. Most of the company, government agency, or ministry in Malaysia, they actually outsource to vendors. They outsource to company outside. Depends on the vendors for the technologies. So back to the questions of Oscar just now. My team is actually have around 6 people, not including me. So including me around 7. There are people who are working on the coding parts. So we generally like to hire those full stack guys because we can be more dynamic in assigning the jobs and roles. And there's also one guy who's in charge of the data. So this guy more like a data analyst rather than a data science. And we also have 2 designers. One is more on the design thinking, design sprint, helping us running design sprint, and another is a UI UX designers.
Because we know the friction that it may happen between IT and also the government side. Can you share which are the main challenges so far working, you as a technical team working with public sector, with also with entrepreneurs, with startups?
I think probably from one aspect to look at it is, as for example, as data. In Malaysia's data that belongs to the government ministry or agencies, they don't release it to the public. There's an initiative there. It's called OpenData.gov.my, where governments actually can open up their data there. But most likely, it's kind of like a snapshot of data. It's not really a kind of like sophisticated API or live data. That's something that we think we can further improve. Another part I would think is the information silo, because I think it's common even in the private company. But if in the government, it's become even more serious. You can't believe, like, even in the Magic, our team, different teams will store their information on the Google Cloud, and the file is in their own drive. So it's when the guy left Magic, and no one will know what's the data from them. So that's what happened to us in the early days. So we actually faced that kind of challenge, and we decided to build our own stack of technology to create a single source of truth where all the data can be in one place, and we get our top management buy-in. So the KPI is only measured if your data is in the database.
Any questions? Nothing? Well, I have one last question for all of you. I would like to know what are the elements to make meaningful connections at ecosystem level, in your opinion.
So, if I'm thinking for myself, I already mentioned the 3 C's, and we are actually really basing our thinking on the 3 C's plus the D. So it's the competencies, it's the connectedness. And now the question is, what are the key elements for better connection? And I think, at least from the European perspective, because we are let's say the umbrella of 28 different ecosystems, national ecosystems, the most important is the not full, but as much alignment and understanding as possible between national ecosystems. Because if this will happen, if more countries will start to think the same way, then you will have a much better market share for a product, or for a product from a company from one country that wants to operate at a larger scale. You'll also have better access to capital, and you also have better access to competencies. So basically, what I believe is the key is to get engagement and commitment and alignment between various systems from our member states.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure there's many ways to look at this depending on what level you're operating at. You're definitely operating at a very high level, and every ecosystem will have its pain points in governance, in communications, and so on. So how we try to create meaningful connections. We organize conferences and events every year. Next year we will be organizing four different conferences, and not here in Finland. But then we have these local hubs. So right now in 24 different places. And actually this morning I had a chance to participate remotely in our Korean hub, which had 120 people participating there, and it was very exciting. At this stage in our ecosystem development, the way we approach the meaningful connections is to make sure that there's that all these hubs and these kind of sub-ecosystems, that they're highly aligned but loosely coupled. And what we mean by that is that we share common values and share common goals strategically, but we don't have a lot of say in how locally go about it. And the reason is that certainly from a kind of a global point of view, even as we are the headquarters, we would not know what's the best way to operate in Malaysia. We would not know what's the best way to operate in Cameroon, like our great hub there is, or the Silicon Valley. So in that sense, we have these kind of very independent and agile sub-networks, and then making sure that we're connecting and aligning both online and then at these regional conferences. I hope I'm answering to your question somewhat, but that's our mode of operation.
So I do not have specific experience in building an ecosystem in a large scale, but neo ecosystem among our platforms, I do have some experience. As well, my personal experience working with WeChat. Does anyone know about WeChat? Tencent, right? The success of it is because one guys in the companies at the first day when they start the mega apps, the first thing they want to do is building an ecosystem, and I used to work with them and learn about how they build the ecosystem. And let's look back also the nature ecosystem, right? How ecosystem as a good sustainable ecosystem. Good weather, no disease, and greens, and all this will make, I think this we can apply same backs when we have wanted to build a new ecosystem or mega ecosystems. It's all about first thing first, right? If you want to build your gardens or your forest, you must make sure it's well fertilized and you have put in love and you're open, you don't pollute it, you don't put shit on, you can put some shit as a fertilizer. But it's a nurturing mindset and openness to build ecosystem. That's the first thing first for getting a mindset right. And then, and I think in long run, we are talking about 50 years from now, there's no so-called ecosystem. It's the one thing, oneness, and it's the earth things. And intra neo ecosystem and cross-border ecosystem or the whole ecosystem will become oneness or even borderless, right?
So I think the startup ecosystem are especially unique on its own, because there's a lot of data have to be exchanged even outside the country. Like for example, a startup in Malaysia, they don't just stay in Malaysia, they will expand to all the regional country. So if we are the government that's in charge of startup in Malaysia, we also need the data, for example, from the Singapore governments. So I think that's the to create that kind of openness that I kind of agree that because data for the private company, they look at it as a kind of like money or opportunity. But for the government, it's let's say you opening the data, it means that sometimes it means you open your weakness to others, right? That's how the government mindset sometimes is that have to be improved. So I think to create an ecosystem, we need to make sure there's an openness there.
More questions from the audience? Any final thoughts, conclusions?
I could ask one in regards of your role in the specific having the rare situation of having actually a software development team inside a government organization following the modern development practices. What do you see is the potential impact that can have compared to having outsourced or existing technologies?
So I think one of the benefits that I see immediately is that having a data guys in your team, you kind of be able to set the standard of the data with the top management from the day ones. That's kind of like make sure that each different teams stay with the standards and no one's like, if for example like industry list, it's hard to imagine that team A might use this 5 industry and team B might have their own 10 industry list. So and another point of view is that the data guy actually can help setting a KPI, and because as an internal team, we don't need to rely on the vendors, we can do it much faster and more efficiently.
can I just comment on that? I believe here also in Helsinki we have the open source technologies team, which sounds like it's similar to what you're doing, and they really have had some great results coming from that. Maybe you have a chance to engage with them as well.
Okay, more questions there?
You all talk a lot about, I think it's right.
Okay.
You all talk a lot about like data and KPIs and so on. So like, can you bring kind of in a concrete, so you know, what is the data that you see is important and should be shared? What are the KPIs that you see that should be measured? So kind of bringing them on this level, like what is this important data between ecosystem that you see that should be shared?
Maybe I start first. So for Magic specifically, because we don't give funding to the startup directly, there's already another agency that's doing that role. The kind of data we have are different with them. Right? For example, we will definitely want the data from this company, these organizations. Like for example, how many money have been given to which startups. Right? That's the kind of data we need from them. And for them, probably they will need the data like how many startups we have trained for the ecosystem, who are the founders behind these startups, and how in what status of the startup is.
Yeah, I don't think we have the kind of ecosystem data that I think you are referring to as what's happening in the ecosystem. That's not really relevant for us since we are not a funder. We are more of a facilitator of companies and individuals. But in terms of the personal data in general that the companies who are in the ecosystem share, I mean, that's all across the spectrum, starting from whatever smart watches to your finances or whatever. But that's really up to the applications, and that's not really the ecosystem facilitators role. We are more of a kind of a networker organization, if you will, if I understood your question right.
Anything else? Okay, thanks so much for participating in this panel. Let's move on to the next step. So one of the reasons to make this event is to